Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have left this evening. Thank you for joining us. Sean will be back on Monday again. I'm Jason Chaffetz. Jason in the house, if you're following me on social media. Jason in the house. But we're very fortunate to have Pete Hegseth, who's filling in for Laura Ingraham, up next. Pete, it's all yours.
Jason, you're a natural. You should have given up this Congress thing a long time ago.
I know. Tell me, believe me. I love it. It's
Nicely
fun.
done, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, well, good evening from New York City. Welcome to the Ingraham Angle. I'm Pete Hegseth, in tonight for Laura. Now, there's lots of news to jump into tonight. President Trump just wrapped up a big rally in Montana a short time ago, making waves, as you can imagine, on everything from illegal immigration to Maxine Waters to his favorite nickname for his favorite senator in Massachusetts. We've got it all covered for you this evening. Plus, 3 candidates are said to remain for President Trump's Supreme Court pick. That's what Fox News is reporting tonight. We've got new details on the Democratic onslaught against whoever the finalist is, no matter who he or she may be. And why we could be seeing the Democrat Party self-destruct before our eyes. News alert to you, this is not your daddy's Democratic Party. More evidence tonight. But first, the battle over ICE and illegal immigration. It burst into new levels of intensity and, you might say, insanity over the July 4th holiday, with Democrat-backed protests taking place across the country on Independence Day. I don't know about you, but when I think Independence Day, I think protesting law enforcement. And we shouldn't be surprised after abolish ICE has become the new rallying cry for many on not just the hard left, but just the straight up left. Listen.
I think that this disastrous immigration policy should be abolished. I happen to have voted against ICE, the formation of ICE, back in 2002.
I'm for the abolition of ICE.
Congress needs to change the policies of ICE so they don't terrorize communities.
And now those on the ground have reportedly, or no, apparently, not just apparently, they have resorted to stunt tactics. One protester climbed New York's Statue of Liberty yesterday to wave the Abolish ICE banner, leading to the evacuation of Liberty Island. And of course, plenty of American citizens and others didn't get access to Lady Liberty yesterday. After hours, the protester was finally pulled down and arrested, rightfully so, by law enforcement. But she could barely wait to speak out to the public following her release. Listen.
Michelle Obama, our beloved First Lady that I care so much about, said when they go low, we go high, and I went as high as I could.
Yeah, risking the lives of law enforcement in the process. But naturally, President Trump was game to take her on tonight in his Montana rally. Listen.
You saw that clown yesterday on the Statue of Liberty? You see the guys that went up there? I wouldn't have done it. I would have said, let's get some nets and let's wait till she comes down. Just get some nets, really. You see those guys, the bravery of doing that? What a group.
Clown is right. The president also fired a new shot over the bow of his immigration critics.
The new platform of the Democrat Party is to abolish ICE. In other words, they want to abolish immigration enforcement entirely. That's what they want to do. They want everybody coming in. And you know, the beauty with ICE, they're so tough. When you have these MS-13 thugs come in, ICE goes in and wipes them out like nothing, because they're much tougher. We will not stand for these vile Democrat smears against our law enforcement.
Strong stuff. Well, joining us now with reaction tonight from Irvine, California, former ICE agent Claude Arnold. We've got immigration attorney Alan Orr joins us live from Washington, D.C. And with us in studio, former INS Special Agent Michael Cutler. Thank you, gentlemen, all for joining us this morning. Michael, I'll start with you here, right here in studio. You were with the INS, which is the precursor to ICE. After 9/11, ICE was formed. But yet you say even this iteration after 9/11 of ICE is not enough.
No, it's not. We've got about 6,000 ICE agents for the entire country. More than half of them aren't even doing immigration enforcement. The 9/11 Commission, to which I provided...
6,000. And only half are, so 3,000...
If we're lucky.
Loyal ICE agents enforcing the law.
Immigration laws from within the interior. And if you look at the 9/11 Commission report, and I provided testimony to the Commission, multiple failures of the immigration system, particularly a lack of meaningful interior enforcement, immigration fraud, visa fraud, made it possible for the terrorists, not only on 9/11, but they looked at other terrorists. And almost all of them exploited vulnerabilities in the immigration system. So now we've got 3,000 ICE agents enforcing immigration law versus 20,000 Border Patrol agents, 45,000 TSA employees, and 37,000 police officers just for the city of New York. ICE is almost non-existent anyway.
So
why in the world would you get rid of it?
Once they get through, they're outmatched as far as size and number of agents at this point.
And it's not just about arresting illegal aliens. It's about going after the fraud. It's about going after employers who hire these folks. It's about going after the gangs and working on
drugs,
the task
human
forces.
trafficking, everything like that.
Sure.
Claude, let me go to you. As an ICE agent who's been on the ground, are there enough of you? I know you're retired, but what do the folks still there believe and feel?
Yeah, well, so as a point of correction, I too was with the INS before ICE was created. But as a point of correction, there's the Enforcement and Removal Operations Division has about 6,000 officers and agents itself, and all they do is civil immigration enforcement, the interior enforcement. Then Homeland Security Investigations, the special agents, half of their duties is immigration enforcement. They have 6,000 agents. So if you want to say half their time is spent doing investigating immigration crimes, then I guess you could say 3,000 of them are
fair point.
dedicated to
But 3,000 or 6,000 still not a lot compared to other agencies as well. But talk to me about your work on the ground every day. You're accused of being a terrorist. You're accused of being a thug. Yeah. You're accused of being inhumane. Talk to me about the job of an ICE agent.
Yeah, that's obviously is ludicrous because ICE was born out of 9/11, and one of its primary responsibilities is counterterrorism and national security. They have the second largest presence on the federal Joint Terrorism Task Force of any other federal agency. They not only investigate immigration crimes related to national security threats, but they also investigate customs violations related to the same thing. So export violation, export of technology that are going to bad actor countries like North Korea, potentially China. And then, of course, the immigration enforcement stuff, disrupting and dismantling the organizations that smuggle people, goods into the U.S. that threaten our national security.
Well, groups like MS-13 that the president has talked about quite a bit. Alan, let me go to you. You're an immigration attorney. You probably take a bit of a different view on this. You've talked, at least in what I've read, about structural reforms to ICE as opposed to abolish ICE. But the rhetoric on the left is abolish. What's the difference in your mind?
There's a huge difference. I mean, I think the show guests tonight really show the issue that I want to put forward. Before there was ICE, there was INS, and INS doesn't exist anymore, and now ICE does exist, and we still protect our borders. So this conversation about abolish ICE really is a little bit of a political fringe on both ends of the parties. So if we sort of think about this for a minute, it's not about a political conversation right now.
What's the political fringe on the right, Alan? I don't mean to interrupt you, but what's the political fringe on the right when you refer?
Libertarians are also saying, what is ICE purpose? What is the purpose of ICE? So on both ends of the spectrum,
they're not climbing the Statue of Liberty. I mean, they're not putting their whole platform as a party on abolishing ICE.
And neither are we. We're putting our platform on human rights and humanitarian rights, because in your montage, what was missing were the women separated from their children and this delay of 3,000 kids, or maybe more, that we don't know about. So this conversation about ICE really isn't so much about ICE, but really about this humanitarian problem we have at our border and this blown out consideration of saying, oh, ICE isn't doing enough, when in fact your first guest said CBP really is at the border. There are enough people there. We have officers in New York City. So what is this great concern? What is ICE really doing?
Good. It's a fair point. You talked about, Alan, about securing the border. Michael, I know INS and ICE are internal enforcement, but if you had the border secured, then the need for ICE wouldn't be what it is today.
Where does the border exist? We have 50 border states. The notion that everything happens on the Mexican border is wrong. None of the 9/11 hijackers ran the Mexican border. Go back to the 9/11 report. We have 50 border states. Any state that lies on the northern or southern borders or has international airports or has access to our 95,000 miles of coastline are border states.
You have a little bit of agreement with Alan, though. You're saying you don't think ICE is structured properly right now. But your argument is ICE isn't ICE enough, that there isn't enough latitude.
Well, I'll tell you who would agree with that also is the former chairman of the House Immigration Subcommittee, a Republican by the name of John Hostetler. I was at a hearing with him 44 months after 9/11. He complained that the way DHS was put together de-emphasized border security and immigration enforcement. And it's remarkable because 44 months after 9/11, that's how long it took us to win the Second World War. At that hearing, we were told that they were still working on a mission statement for immigration.
Exactly. Even today. I mean, I think part of the issue that we should look at is that they really haven't have a clear mission. As your guest said, they're doing this and this and this and this and this. So
then,
what is
that's
that really clear
Alan,
mission that,
if
that
then
they
is
need to be
the
doing?
answer to abolish, or is the answer to refine, or refine down to the core mission of the fact that we don't have our arms around who's coming to our country? The president has made the point about merit-based immigration. We don't have that right now. So until we do, wouldn't we want ICE out there aggressively enforcing our laws?
Listen, we all want our
if
laws.
I could jump in here.
Yeah,
sure. We are a country of laws.
We'll
First,
get
and
you,
I do want our
Claude, in
laws
one second.
enforced.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
And I think part of the problem here is the characterization of the issue. People applying for asylum at the southern ports is not illegal immigration because they have a right to apply for asylum.
Well, what's
the numbers are not the problem.
What's wrong with arresting the folks that don't go to the port of entry?
Every day and don't have an issue with them at other ports.
I have to make one point about that.
Hold on, let me get to Claude.
Right.
Claude first, as a former ICE agent, please.
Yeah. So it's absolutely right. ICE is essential, and they are not used to their full effectiveness. Both on the left and the right, there has been an ignorance of interior enforcement. So when they passed the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986, the idea was, okay, give amnesty to people, and now we're going to secure the borders, and we're going to do interior enforcement. We're going to make sure that only people who are authorized to work can work. But, as long as the border is not secure, the magnet for people to come here is employment.
Michael, before I get to you,
enforcing that.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the morale of an agent on the ground right now who hears the impugning of their motives, that they're horrible people? Does it affect the way they do their job?
I think they're used to it. I mean, when you do this, Mr. Cutler can attest to this. It's very political. As the political winds shift, we just adjust. We're very resilient. And so those agents are very resilient. Immigration enforcement is a politically charged topic, and they know, depending on who's in the White House, who's in the Congress, the political winds will change.
Michael, but I know when I was in the military, the last thing I wanted was politics infecting my ability to do my job.
But it does. But here's what's being left out of interior enforcement. It's not just making arrests. It's going after immigration fraud. Goodness, we've given citizenship to terrorists, not only overstays. The Tsarnaev family got political asylum, claiming credible fear we can't go home. They went home as soon as they got asylum. One of the brothers was a naturalized citizen. Faisal Shahzad, the Times Square bomber, naturalized citizen. We are processing applications for citizenship, giving the keys to the kingdom to aliens without doing the investigations that are necessary to properly vet them.
It does not strike me as a good idea.
Well,
Alan,
that's a problem.
You talked about ports of entry. Why wouldn't the emphasis just be, if you're coming here seeking asylum, you have a legitimate issue, go to a port of entry. But as the president has pointed out, if you're going to sprint across that border, knowing what you do is illegal, why are you given and afforded all the rights of a citizen?
I don't think that they're sprinting across the border, as we're always claiming. There's a little bit of zero tolerance about people who enter between ports of entry. People are coming here to file for asylum, which is a natural American law. And I think if we did revamp if we revamp the immigration system so that it did work for the people that are here who are undocumented, or people who needed to be here to work, as we've already seen an increase in H-2B visas to meet the need of the market, then we wouldn't have this problem. So it's about sort of reforming the system and making it work, sort of backlogging immigration more than it already is, the 6,000 cases that we have or asylum that are waiting in the courts, and the huge backlogs in Indian national and Chinese nationals waiting for legal immigration processes is not the answer. Sort of shutting down the United States and saying everybody needs to have this extreme vetting. What is extreme vetting necessarily? I'm waiting on that memorandum to see what it is.
I'll tell you what
Michael,
it is.
10 seconds.
Okay.
Briefly.
It's doing investigations in the field to determine who's actually in the country. By the way, we keep displacing American workers with foreign workers. It drives down wages because immigration has become a delivery system for an unlimited supply of cheap labor, and immigration clients for members of Congress who happen to be immigration attorneys also.
Well, and at the very least, we want to know who's coming here. We want them having the skills to
and not displace American workers and not pose a threat to our safety.
Unemployment is at the lowest rate possible, right? Unemployment is the lowest rate possible, so that's not a reality.
I'll tell you this.
But you have to know who you're letting in the country.
Of course. That's
if you're saying you didn't know that before now, I mean, do you honestly believe that we're letting in thousands of people a day without knowing who they are?
At least we agree on one thing, as you have said, Alan, that
if you grant amnesty to a bunch of people,
we got to leave it right there, gentlemen.
Absolutely doing that.
Thank you for your service. All of you, appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
You got it. And then there were three, so is being reported. President Trump makes his short list of Supreme Court candidates. We've got new details on how Democrats will try to stop the final pick, no matter who it is, coming up next. Welcome back. Well, the interviews, they're over at the White House, and a short list of 3 people, we're being told, remain as potential Supreme Court picks by President Trump. He's set to announce the final decision at 9 p.m. Eastern this upcoming Monday night. And Democrats, of course, are doing everything in their power to whip up their base, no matter who the choice is. The resistance, it must continue. Joining us now with the latest is Fox News correspondent Kristen Fisher. Kristen, good evening.
Hey, Pete. Well, President Trump told reporters on board Air Force One tonight that his shortlist has shrunk to 4, and he thinks that he's narrowed it down to 2 or 3 finalists. Now, our sources tell Fox News that those finalists are 3 appellate court judges, all of whom are widely regarded to be constitutional conservatives. They are Brett Kavanaugh from the D.C. Circuit, the 6th Circuit's Raymond Kethledge, and Amy Coney Barrett of the 7th Circuit. Now, Kavanaugh is kind of the steady Washington insider. The 53-year-old sits on the same powerful court that served as a stepping stone for 3 current Supreme Court justices, as well as the late Antonin Scalia. He clerked for retiring Justice Kennedy, and he has deep ties to his former boss, President George W. Bush. Another former Kennedy clerk, Judge Raymond Kethledge. The 51-year-old is known for being a bit of a loner. He's less high profile and has less of a judicial record than Kavanaugh, but he's also a lot less controversial, which could help him get confirmed, help him get through the Senate. And then there's Amy Coney Barrett, the only female finalist, we believe. She has 7 children. She clerked for the late Justice Antonin Scalia, and she's a devout Catholic, but her writings on overturning judicial precedent have raised a red flag with a very critical Republican Senator, Susan Collins, who fears that she might overturn Roe v. Wade. Now, President Trump says he hopes to make his decision by Sunday. Then on Monday, a big primetime announcement at the White House, something he made official during that rally tonight in Montana. Listen here.
And if you turn in Monday at 9 o'clock, I think you're going to be extremely happy with this election, right? I want to thank Justice Kennedy for his lifetime of truly distinguished service. And he had confidence in me. He left because he said, you're going to pick somebody great.
But Democrats say no one on the president's shortlist is great. They're now putting the pressure on 2 key Republican senators, Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins. One liberal group is planning to spend millions of dollars on advertising and activism in the senators' home states, Alaska and Maine, which is the exact same strategy that they used to help defeat the Republican effort to repeal Obamacare last year. But of course, Pete, this is going to be a much more difficult fight for the Democrats to win.
You're right.
Pete.
Some precedent there. Kristen, thank you very much. Appreciate it. As we mentioned, Democrats, they're throwing the kitchen sink at President Trump's Supreme Court candidates. None more than at Judge Amy Coney Barrett. You can't put it any other way. An incredibly qualified U.S. Court of Appeals judge who is a devout Catholic and a mother of 7 children. The left's hypocrisy on her is so thick you could choke on it. Joining us now with reaction is Carrie Severino, Policy Director of the Conservative Judicial Crisis Network and a former clerk for Justice Clarence Thomas, along with attorney and radio talk show host Leo Terrell. Thank you both for joining us this morning. Carrie, let me start with you. So the criticism of Amy Barrett and knowing how accomplished she is that, well, she may be just too devout of a Catholic, yet the left has, usually sees a qualified female candidate, and especially someone who's already been confirmed with 55 votes, as someone who would be, yet again, breaking the glass ceiling. Why the resistance to Amy?
Well, this is really ridiculous because under our Constitution, there is no religious test for office, and that's what they're trying to do here. What I think is happening is you're seeing people like Senator Feinstein who are very threatened by an accomplished, articulate, but conservative woman, because that really puts the lie to their identity politics. She does not toe their line and their feminist idea of what a woman should be, and she understands how to defend her positions. So I think that's someone they feel very threatened by, and that's why we saw the hard attack on her during her confirmation hearings with that famous but so strange line, "The dogma lives loudly within her."
Sure.
That'll go down in history, and now it might go down in history as the beginning of a Supreme Court justice's career.
Well, yet she was still confirmed with 55 votes. Leo, before I go to you, we're going to let Amy Coney Barrett speak for herself. She spoke to a group in Jacksonville, Florida. This is what she said about interpreting the Constitution. Listen.
To say, I want to appoint someone who's pro-life, or I want to appoint someone whose primary focus is protecting minority rights, though the candidates are talking to their bases and talking to the electorate and saying, signal, I'm going to put people on the court who share your policy preferences. As I was saying before, I think that's not the right qualification for a justice. I mean, we shouldn't be putting people on the court that share our policy preferences. We should be putting people on the court who want to apply the Constitution.
Applying the Constitution, Leo, what do you take issue with there?
We shouldn't put people on there who will adopt or believe in the same policy. Let me tell you, have you read about this woman? I've read her before I came on your show. This woman does not believe in stare decisis. Carrie, you know what that means? She doesn't believe in established law. She is telling people that she has no problem overturning.
No, very bad.
No, excuse me, with all due respect, I don't think Roe versus Wade is a bad law. It's been on the books for about 45 years. But this, if you want to be honest, she is talking about overturning established law. That scares me as a lawyer. And Carrie, you didn't mention that. She also said in a speech that lawyers should have a higher calling to God. God has nothing to do with the law. This woman is scary. Very scary, because she's a threat to overturning established law. Carrie and Pete, I hope you talk about those items, because that's dangerous.
Well, you read, as I'm sure you did, like many Americans, looking at the Declaration of Independence yesterday. Of course, our founders believed in God, believed in nature's God. And there's been, you would acknowledge, Leo, there have been plenty of laws in this country that were on the books for 45 years that should have never been on the books in the first place. So take Roe v. Wade as an example, Carrie. You know, there are a lot of folks who look at jurisprudence on the left and the right and say that the right found there in Roe v. Wade, they really had to bend over backwards to find that right to privacy within the Constitution. I believe it was penumbras formed by emanations on Roe v. Wade. Carrie, can you honor the Constitution without being ideological?
Absolutely, and that's what Amy Coney Barrett was talking about. It's not about finding someone who's going to give you a laundry list of preferences you want achieved. Every justice on the Supreme Court agrees that there are times when you have to overturn a law or a ruling that was incorrectly decided. If we didn't have that, we would still have the horrible Dred Scott case here, finding that black Americans could be slaves.
Don't play games.
It is correct to overturn precedents that are incorrect.
That's a red herring.
Why is that a red herring?
Let me just ask you point blank. Hey, Roe v. Wade, tell me right now on national television, bad decision? Tell me right now. Tell all the pro-choice Republicans, moderate Republicans. Tell me right now on national TV, it's Roe v. Wade,
I'll sit here and say that
Lawrence,
it was go ahead, I'll let you answer it yourself.
Lawrence Stride, President Obama's legal advisor, a Harvard law professor, constitutional law textbook author, he thinks it is not a law that a precedent that is a good quality precedent. But the question here is very different. I don't think this justice is going to be of the vote to overturn Roe versus Wade, because the middle justice, the swing vote, is now Chief Justice John Roberts. I think he is much harder to predict, and I have no idea what he will do in this case.
Leo,
this is really a distraction.
Leo, there's a lot of people in this country that believe Roe v. Wade is terrible and abortion is a sin on this country. There's a lot of people that legitimately hold that policy view. There's also a lot of people, including my professor at Princeton University, Robbie George, who pointed out many times that the decision of Roe v. Wade, whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, was judicial activism at its finest.
You know, this
Pete,
debate
respectfully, when Carrie uses Dred Scott as an analogy, she insults the intelligence of every viewer. Now, you know, Pete, since 1973, all the current administration, Republicans and Democrats, legislation has acknowledged Roe v. Wade. And this judge is hell-bent on overturning Roe v. Wade. She should not be nominated.
No, you're making it a single issue. I think the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, religious liberty,
it's a big issue.
Government overreach, the 10th Amendment. Choose? Of course it's a big issue, and it's one of the things that could come before the court. Are you saying it's not a legitimate policy position to believe that maybe it could be decided at the state level?
You know, I think all of this...
I'm telling you that this judge should believe in stare decisis. Don't you believe that, Carrie? Can you just say yes or no? It's very simple.
I absolutely believe in stare decisis, but no principles of stare decisis say that every case, once decided, never gets overturned. Zero justices in the Supreme Court believe that. This is all a distraction. These are scare tactics used against Justice O'Connor, Justice Kennedy, Justice Souter. They were saying they would be the vote to overturn Roe versus Wade. Those were the 3 votes that upheld Roe versus Wade in the Planned Parenthood case. It's a distraction from the real principles we're talking about here, which is this someone who's going to look at the law first and foremost, look at the Constitution first and foremost?
I'll tell you,
Amy Barrett, unlike many people, has written clearly.
One more big comment.
She believes
very important comment. I read one of her speeches. And she said, I didn't understand this as a lawyer. She told a group of lawyers that we as lawyers have a higher calling to God. Can you explain that to me? Why is she injecting religion? I don't know what that means. I don't know. As a lawyer, I don't know what that means.
Of Independence, I think our framers may have said
here we
that
go
too.
again.
She is
Here we go
unique,
again.
though.
Here we go again. Back to our
She's unique that she's written that. And she has said specifically, if her moral beliefs conflicted with her role as a judge, she said she would recuse herself. What else can you ask? She says specifically, I'm not going to substitute my moral beliefs for the law. The law comes first.
Indicative of the fact, these are going to be some confirmation hearings, no matter who is chosen. That'll be must-see TV. A good debate. Carrie Leo, thank you for your time tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You got
My
it.
pleasure.
Well, is the Democratic Party sowing the seeds of its own destruction? We'll explain right after this brief commercial break. Welcome back. We're going to ask a simple question in this segment. Is the Democratic Party killing itself before our eyes and in real time? That's the argument laid out by writer Ian Henderson in a new piece on the conservative website American Greatness. He writes in part, and I quote, "Increasingly so, more whites are realizing that the economically center-left and socially, culturally conservative part of FDR and JFK no longer exists. The old Democratic Party was a pro-labor, pro-union party. Today, the Democratic Party is the party of open borders, multiculturalism, and environmentalism, positions that reduce wages, divide communities, and undermine economic prosperity. The traditional base of white working-class Democrats either cannot relate to or are opposed to these policies, and as a result, have been leaving the Democratic Party in droves." Joining us now to debate is Garland Nixon, a radio talk show host and Democratic strategist, along with actor and current Republican congressional candidate in California, Antonio Sabato Jr. Thank you both for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Garland, I'm going to start with you. As a member of that party, do you feel like the party of yesteryear is no longer the party of today, and as a result, you're losing crucial blocks of support?
Yes, but I do feel that the party is moving in the direction, and not necessarily willingly. I think that there are a number of people who have been associated with the Democratic Party for many years who have left because they were angry that the direction of the party was going.
So you're agreeing with the thesis of the piece?
No, yeah, but for totally different reasons, because I think the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortezes and the Ben Jealouses of the world and the Bernie Sanders are moving in the right direction, which is a populist movement, which is based on policy and not on identity politics, and that's why they're having success, and they're going to get their base to the polls, and you win by getting your base to the polls, not by running to Republicans.
But part of what you're acknowledging, and I'll go to you, Antonio, is that identity politics isn't what worked. Part of what is mentioned in the piece, isn't mentioned in the piece, is socialism, which you see candidates being elected with that label as well. Antonio, is socialism, identity politics, open borders, and environmentalism a winning formula?
No, it's a negative formula for everyone, including everyone in this country. I mean, they're not the Democratic Party anymore. They're the Socialist Party. You know, I love presidents like JFK. That was the last guy for me as far as the Democratic Party. But after that, and what we've seen in the last few years, especially under the new administration and the attacks that we receive every day, violence. I mean, I've never seen that before, and I'm fighting against it. I think it's a sign of bullying, and I think people are walking away from the Democratic Party, and they know the Republicans are there to support America and our flag and our Constitution, and that's what we're here to do, to bring prosperity and peace. That's what we want, and we want to protect our country. What's more important than that?
Well, good point, Garland. A great example of the impossible choice that is the modern Democratic Party is traditionally the party of unions, of the working man. Yet at the same time now, very much beholden to environmental interests who have a different priority and have sunk industries that President Trump has said, I want to bring back because I want clean water and I want clean air, but I don't want ridiculous environmental regulations that undercut entire industries. Garland, how do you square that circle?
By disagreeing with you, because I don't think that industries have been sunk by environmental regulations. I think industries have been sunk by poor decisions and deregulated environments. That the two things are not the same. You can't just because we have a clean environment. We don't have to poison ourselves just to have a strong economy.
Wait, so are we poisoning ourselves by unleashing an energy renaissance? So now we will be the world's largest producer of oil. Is that poisoning ourselves, or is that giving jobs to Americans?
Oh, that's poisoning ourselves. A true energy renaissance is clean energy, which means we won't have to pay for anything other than the infrastructure in the long term, and it will be cleaner. Why wouldn't we want to lead the world with a clean energy industry?
So, Antonio, to you, As part of getting that clean energy future, of course, is subsidizing certain forms of energy that are not tenable on the private market. How long do you do that? And that looks a lot like picking winners and losers and back to socialism.
Listen, they run this country in a socialist way. Our farmers, my farmers in Ventura County, are paying the price by being over-regulated. You know, they want to talk about the environment. Why don't we talk about the people of the United States and taking care of them? Why don't we talk about the homelessness in California? Why don't we take care of them? We're always talking about everything else but the American people. And that's why I'm running, because I want Ventura County to be on top again, to be #1, and that's what I'm there to support and represent in November. And the Republican Party is there for the American people. We're here to make sure not only that the country is clean, but is actually going to the next level and being great again in so many levels. So what we've seen in the last, year and a half, it's great. What we've seen in taxes, our military, our border, everything is going smooth, but they want to fight it. They want to fight everything that this president is doing every day, well, and the Republican Party.
I forgot that the resist is the other core tenet, of course, of the Democratic Party. But Garland, I was interested in one thing you said earlier, that identity politics is not the future. I mean, the whole hyphenated future, as opposed to believing we're all Americans, regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation. How do you get the party is, this piece argues that the Democratic Party is based in identity politics fundamentally, and that will be its undoing. How do you undo viewing people as a subgroup as opposed to a set of principles?
Well, that's easy, because we already have the formula for that. We watched Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders was a 74-year-old Jewish guy that had a lot of success doing that. We see now a 28-year-old Latino woman who's having success doing that.
Both of which are socialist.
Right. So the bottom line is this. It's about policy. Look, people right now, if you look at the polls, you don't have to, I don't care what you're called. If you go with legalizing marijuana, 64% of Americans are in favor. If you go with bringing our troops home from foreign wars, you're getting close to 70%. So I don't care if you call yourself the Whigs, socialist, or whatever. If you're running for policies that most Americans agree with, according to the polls, you're probably going to get your people to the polls, and you're going to win.
I appreciate the fact that he's trying to talk about policy, but when I turn on other networks, when I'm forced to, say at the airport, I see nothing but resistance and Trump hate and talk of Russian collusion, and very little talk of what comes next. And when the answer becomes Medicare for all and legalize marijuana, which is a legitimate policy position, that's fine, and socialism.
Party would actually work with this president, because at the end of the day, we're trying to make America great, keeping it great, doing what's best for the American people. Not what's best for your party, not what's best for your leaders or your party, but what's best for Americans. And Americans are waking up, and they're saying, we don't want to go for this anymore. This is a false lie. We're going to vote Republican, because, at the end of the day, the Republican Party cares for the American people. Well, and that's what the most important thing for me. Elect people who actually care and love this country.
It just, Garland, feels like maybe it's the educational system, maybe it's our media, maybe it's Hollywood, but latching on to socialism, identity politics, open borders, environmentalism, just doesn't strike me in America. Maybe Europe, but not here, as a long-term winning strategy. That's what the piece argues. Thank you both. Great debate. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Well, the Trump administration reverses Obama-era rules pushing race in college admissions. And the left, predictably, they're furious about it. But a prominent former professor says this is a victory for many students of many shades. She joins us next to explain. Good evening and welcome back to the Ingraham Angle. Last time I said good morning, someone's been doing too much of the morning show. Thanks for being with us. President Trump is hitting an angry nerve with the left. The administration is officially withdrawing Obama-era rules promoting the use of race in college admissions. Instead, local colleges and universities will now be encouraged to adopt race-blind admissions. Since news of the decision, many of Trump's critics, they've been apoplectic.
It's a serious mistake, and it sends a deeply dangerous signal to all of our school communities that this administration does not believe in, is not here to support diversity and inclusion in our school communities.
This is yet just again an example of an effort to turn back the hands of time, to retrogress when it comes to civil rights. This is a repeal of 7 Obama-era guidances. It's consistent with what the Justice and Education Departments have done. We must resist this because it is inconsistent with American values.
This administration has a great disdain for diversity.
Disdain for diversity, but not everyone in the world of higher education sees it that way. Some, in fact, say that Trump's reversal is a win for students. One of them is Dr. Carol Swain, author and former professor of political science and law at Vanderbilt University, as well as Princeton University. She joins us now, along with Democratic strategist Antoine Seawright. Thank you both for joining us this evening. Carol, let me start with you. If you would, please explain what this does and why you believe this change by the Trump administration is a good thing.
Well, first of all, I'll say that I have been a professor for 28 years, and affirmative action, race-based affirmative action has been around all of those 28 years. So it's not something that Obama initiated, but Obama became far more aggressive with it. And it seemed as if his administration believed that everyone belonged in college. And this has done a disservice for many students who are not prepared for the colleges that they have been able to gain admission. And so for black students, it results in situations where only about 38% graduate in 6 years. Many students incur debt and they leave school, they have the debt, they don't have a college degree. They could have been successful at a lesser school or one that was more appropriate for their qualifications, or maybe they were someone that could have gone into trade school.
Antoine, the doctor has been on these campuses. Your response?
Well, with all due respect, I think this is par for the course with this administration. This is really not about affirmative action. This is really not about anything that the professor may be referring to. This is just Trump's effort to take this country full steam backwards. The president campaigned on the fact that he wanted to undo and redo any Obama-era policy because he simply wanted to make Barack Obama his political boogie person.
So there couldn't be a disagreement. There couldn't be a legitimate policy disagreement that maybe racial preferences aren't totally healthy to admissions.
Pete, these policies and measures were put in place to ensure that African Americans and the minorities in this country have their seat at the table, because for far too long we have been on the menu and never had our rightful place at the table. Look, if these policies were not in place, perhaps people like me would have never had opportunities to get into certain colleges and universities in this country. And so the bottom line is, I think this is needed, I think it's necessary, and I think this is just Donald Trump's way of feeding his base a red meat issue.
Carol, your response?
I disagree. Even before affirmative action became the law of the land, schools that did not discriminate against blacks had blacks on their student body. The Ivy League schools, they had black students.
It's not about them having
let her finish,
blacks
Antoine,
on the student body.
She let you finish.
But the thing that concerns me, and I've always seen this, there have been many minority students that I have encountered that have been struggling. There are some that are well qualified. I mean, they're at the top of the class, but there are many that are struggling. They are failing. They would have been successful if they had gone to a state university or a community college or a trade school. They leave school with a lot of debt, and I firmly believe that one reason we have so much unrest on college campuses today, so much anger and bitterness, and the students want to self-segregate is because many of them are not prepared for the institutions they have been allowed to matriculate at.
Antoine, you talk about racial differences. There's a case at Harvard right now, pending in the courts, where Asian American students are claiming reverse discrimination, that their numbers are being reduced because they're overqualified. Doesn't that strike you as unfair for them?
Pete, if you don't think that my opinion is in line with reality, ask the National Education Association, ask the National Education Council. These groups have pushed back religiously on the undoing of this policy by this president.
A lot of them are left-wing groups. That's good. It's fine. They're allowed to be so.
This policy is not about whether kids do well on college campuses. This policy is making sure that we have a pool of people that are able to get into colleges and universities around the country. Look, right here in South Carolina, our flagship university has had issues where African-American students, same GPA, same test scores as people who do not look like them, could not get into the school. So I know what that feels like. I know what it's like to be in those situations. So for this policy to be rolled back, this is is simply a political move, and the timing is ironic considering that Trump is considering his Supreme Court nomination, and these type cases have made it to the High Court.
Well, Carol, maybe go ahead. Last word, briefly.
I totally disagree because demographically the nation has changed in significant ways. And what I see is that a lot of black students that could have been successful someplace else are at institutions where they're going to fail. They leave with lots of debt. They are angry. They're bitter. And it is unfair.
This is to make sure they get their chance to get into the school.
Asians. It is unfair against Asians as well as other non-minorities who are better qualified. And it's also, the country is not the same as it was 50 or 60 years ago.
We've got to leave it right there. Good debate. Appreciate you both this evening. Thank you. All right. If you thought Never Trump conservatives couldn't debase themselves any further, think again. Their absurd new solution to stop President Trump. Right after this. Welcome back to the Ingraham Angle. Never Trump conservatives are becoming so marginalized, they're resorting to utterly desperate tactics to avoid irrelevancy. Case in point, take a listen to author and columnist Max Boot, who I will say I've known for years and found before to be a thoughtful guy. He claims to still be a principled conservative, but listen.
I devoutly hope that every single Republican running for election next November loses, because we cannot count on this Republican Party to hold the Donald Trumps of the world accountable. They have just shown that they have no willingness to uphold the Constitution and their oaths of office. So the only way we're going to get accountability in Washington is by electing Democrats.
Whoa. These Never Trumpers may be even more hysterical than Democrats now. Joining us now to analyze is Howard Kurtz, the host of Media Buzz, airing Sundays at 11 a.m. Eastern, right here on the Fox News channel. Howard, thanks for being here. What do you make of the increasing rhetoric, anti-Trump rhetoric, from Never Trumpers?
Well, I get that Max Boot and Steve Schmidt and George Will, who I've respected for years, are upset because they think that President Trump has ruined their vision of the GOP. But it's a bit hard to grasp how they are now openly rooting for Democrats, given that they've spent their whole careers opposing them as the party of big government, big spending, weak foreign policy. And it's hard not to notice, I'm not saying this is their motivation, but it's hard not to notice that these defections bring them favorable publicity, MSNBC contracts, and new respect from the left.
Laura has said, you know, part of the motivation is sort of this elitist, snobbish sense that they know what the Republican Party ought be, and now they don't have the seat at the table, so they're turning the table over. And again, as I said, I've known Max Boot, smart, thoughtful guy, and a lot of foreign policy stuff. But to say vote for Democrats, that's just I can't add it up.
Well, you know, I understand from their point of view, they're saying they still feel they're conservative and President Trump is taking the party in a different direction. That's fine. But what troubles me in saying, you know, root for Democrats, what troubles me is some of the overheated rhetoric here. For example, in a column just the other day, Max Boot wrote that the GOP has become a white nationalist party with a conservative fringe. And he's also compared it to post-war Germany and Japan needs to be destroyed so it can be rebuilt. And I think that betrays how much they hate this president. Yeah. But also, you know, the columns aren't having much impact on actual voters because, you know, you look at the numbers and Trump is enjoying a record 90% approval among Republican voters. So they're in something of an echo chamber, I would say.
Howard, I got to get your comment on a big development here today. Scott Pruitt out at the EPA. He resigned. A lot of heat on him. How much do you think of his decision to resign was driven by the media hysteria? He's made his own mistakes, but the media really went after him relentlessly. Was the media playing an oversized hand here?
Well, there's no question that Scott Pruitt made a lot of mistakes at EPA. Also no question that most of the mainstream media didn't like his policies at the EPA, pruning and changing the direction, regulations and all of that. But a lot of these stories, you know, really did reach a point where anybody else would have been gone from the cabinet months and months and months ago. I mean, asking aides to find a job for his wife and that sort of thing. Laura Ingraham tweeting just the other day that he is the swamp and needed to go. I think even Republicans realized, some of them at least, that he was becoming a political liability for the president who accepted the resignation today.
Howard, did I hear you say that the mainstream media has policy positions?
Well, not overtly, but let's just say there's not a lot of tears being shed for Scott Pruitt's departure in many newsrooms.
You're probably right, in Manhattan and Hollywood as well. Howard Kurtz, thanks for your time. Appreciate what you do.
Good to see you.
You got it. Well, an Iraqi hero who fought alongside American troops prepares for one of our nation's highest honors. That man and his family, incredible story, coming up next. Well, we end with a story near and dear to my heart. When I served in Iraq 12 years ago, my unit partnered with Bakr Ali and his family, his very brave family. They were our Iraqi allies who fought alongside us against al-Qaeda terrorists. They fought alongside U.S. troops, putting their lives on the line every single day. They were targeted by name by al-Qaeda. Bakr and his family, Bakr is here. His family is coming here as legal immigrants. And soon as citizens. I fought for many years to make sure they could get here. As we've celebrated our nation's independence yesterday and freedoms this week, I got the chance to take Bakr around New York City for the first time. He'd always wanted to see it. He came and visited with me. Watch. Right now, we're heading to the airport to meet Bakr. 12 years ago, we were in Iraq together fighting al-Qaeda shoulder to shoulder. Then I fought for years for him to come here through the special immigrant visa program. He's here. He lives in Houston with his family, but he's never been to New York City. We're going to get him right now. What's up, brother? What's the thing you want to see in New York City the most? Well, Statue of Liberty. There we go. You're a new immigrant here. Yeah. Because you fought with the troops in America and put your life on the line. Thankfully, it took us a lot of time, but we got you here through the process. Yeah. What does it feel like to be in America from where we were?
For my family now, they are so pleased to be here. They can now improve themselves, better education, and they have the rights, okay, which we don't have.
When you look at the Statue of Liberty that welcomed so many immigrants to this country for so long, does that feel like home?
You feel like you are a part of this country or you are a part of this community and you get involved faster.
You said you've noticed, one of the things you noticed coming to America are all the flags. What does that say to you?
These people, they are proud to be in this country, okay? You feel you are a part of the people who love the country and want to protect them. And here where I want to be.
All right, Bakr, this is your first time to New York. Obviously, as a result, your first time to where the towers used to stand here in Manhattan. That day on 9/11 obviously affected the lives of Americans. Our paths hadn't crossed then. Why did you know America was the right people to partner with?
We have some principles to defend these people. They was existing here for freedom and against terrorism. It was a dream to me to be here. And here I am.
What's it like to be right here in the middle?